Guys, I'm just going to come out and say it. This year sucked for me. For games, however, this was another great year with some hard hits and some misses. Seriously, this stuff is garbage. So, time for the yearly quick disclaimer before the video starts. This is a list of games that I played in 2024. This is not a list full of games that came out in 2024. I want to do this top 10 in this way to make my list a little more interesting. Also, this list is my opinion, so be prepared to be offended. If you have your own feelings, feel free to write out your top 10 games you played this year in the comments. Or, I don't know, make your own top 10 video. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're new here. Without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10. Gunfire Reborn. As some of you already know, I'm a huge fan of roguelikes, and once again, another one makes it onto one of my lists. Gunfire Reborn is a multiplayer roguelike first-person shooter RPG. That's a lot, I know. You start as one of the many unlockable heroes. Each of them have different upgradable abilities that completely change how you play the game. There's roughly 48 weapons in the base game and 65 with DLC weapons, which doesn't sound like a lot, but with each character's abilities, there's a more than enough combinations in the game to keep you interested for a while. Speaking of characters, making builds in this game is pretty great. Your loot and choices feel impactful every run and allow you to create really powerful and diverse builds that can greatly change your playstyle. Also, at the end of each level, there are modifiers that you can pick up which change your runs for either better or for worse. So no two runs are exactly the same. I do wish, however, that there were more maps because you're going to see the same maps multiple times, which I can see get kind of repetitive. There are a few DLCs that have come out each year, with the newest being the Realm of Frost and Inkwash that came out roughly 3 months ago at the time of recording, which added 2 new characters, bringing the total amount of playable heroes to 12. For $20 on Steam, this is a great game to pick up and play with your friends, and for that reason, Gunfire Reborn makes it in at number 10. Number 9. Killer Frequency. This game surprised me in the best ways possible. Killer Frequency is a first-person horror puzzle game that takes place in 1987. It puts you in the role of a late-night radio talk show host named Forrest Nash that's set in a small town in America. Strange things start to happen as soon as you start the game, as there's a killer in town known as the Whistling Man that's on the loose. Your goal throughout the game is to save everyone who calls the radio station from the killer. How do you do this? Well, basically, you give out directions with clues that are scattered throughout the radio stations that you have to put together. Be careful though, as you can get each person who calls the radio station killed, so make your choices carefully, or just save scum. There's that. Don't be that guy. There's also multiple endings to the game, which adds a ton of replay value. The story of the game is fantastic, as there's multiple plot twists that really shake things up. And as I played the game, I was constantly on edge about what would happen next. But this game isn't the scariest game on the market. I just want to put that out there, which was fine with me because I'm usually not the biggest horror game fan. I'm kind of a chicken, not gonna lie. But the game overall was a pleasant surprise, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's a fan of horror, mystery, detective games. I know, very specific genre, but still. Number 8. Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005. Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005 is my favorite racing game of all time. I actually never completed it when I was younger, but I have very fond memories of the game, so I decided to finally sit down and actually finish it. You play as a racer who is challenged by the main antagonist of the game, his name is Razor, and he cuts some wires in your car for your very first race. What a guy, I know. You lose the race and your car is gone, so now you have to start from scratch in order to get your ride back. How do you do this? Well, you have to challenge a group of racers who are in something called the Blacklist. This is a list of the 15 best racers in the game that the antagonist so happens to be the leader of. The Blacklist members aren't the only thing you have to worry about though. The police are also trying to stop any racer that's trying to make a name for themselves. So you'll have your work cut out for you. In order to challenge each member of the Blacklist, you'll need to earn a reputation, which is gained by completing races, police pursuits, and many other different types of challenges. You'll start the game with very slow cars, of course, but as you play and beat Blacklist members, you'll unlock more upgrades, parts, body kits, and other cars that will help you keep up with the competition. This is a very simple racing game, but man, it's so fun, and the cars are what make this game so great for me. And of course, I'm a big fan of BMWs, so yeah, big fan of the poster car. Number 7, Persona 3 Reload. There were 4 Atlas games released this year, and sadly, I wasn't able to complete all 4. But one of them I completed was Persona 3 Reload. This is a remake of, you guessed it, Persona 3. For those of you that don't know what Persona is, I'll explain. Guys, there's probably not a single person watching this who has never heard of Persona, unless you like live under a rock or something.
Cool! Looking cool, Joker!
Anyways, Persona blends your typical turn-based JRPG game with a dating/relationship simulator. So that's what makes Persona stand out from other JRPGs. As for Persona 3's story, it was really good, just like the original. But honestly, it's not my favorite Persona game. 4 is the best, fight me. The cast was solid, but there were a few characters kind of lacking in my opinion, and some I straight up did not jive with this time around, which really surprised me because it's been a long time since I even touched the original, so I didn't think my opinions would change that much. Also, I really never liked scaling Tartarus as it got really repetitive, but it's nowhere near as annoying compared to the original, thankfully. For those that don't know, Tartarus is basically like the big dungeon of the game. In fact, it's the only dungeon in the game, with multiple blocks that change as you progress the story. The soundtrack is okay. There's a few really good remixes that are better than the original, but there's a lot of tracks that just don't hit the same. But even with all my complaints, I still had a great time playing, so that's why it gets number 7. Number 6, Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 really surprised me this year. It was totally under my radar as I was too busy being excited for Destiny 2's final expansion called The Final Shape. Yeah, Destiny's not doing so hot right now. Anyways, I needed something to hold my attention in the meantime. This is where Helldivers 2 comes into play. Helldivers 2 is a third-person horde shooter where you play as a soldier of the managed democracy of Super Earth. As soon as you start the game, it teaches you the basics at training camp before giving you your own ship to deploy into the galactic war with other squads of 4 people. You're able to pick a loadout of weapons, grenades, armor, buffs, and these things called stratagems. These are special tools and abilities that can be used with specific button combinations that can help you and your squad fight off various enemy factions, which are the Terminids, Automatons, and the recently announced faction, the Illuminate. Each faction has specific enemy types that can only be killed in certain ways. For example, you'll have a heavily armored unit that can't be killed with your equipped weapons, but they can be killed with explosives and or stratagems. I personally like this because you're not just shooting at bullet sponges and instead need to really think about what you're shooting at, as some enemies have weak spots. Helldivers 2 is also fun with friends as there's friendly fire, so you can accidentally blow up, squish, or melee your teammates while they're trying to evac on the ship. Looking at you, Tyler.
Go on, let's go. Why is the ship parked on
What? What just happened?
We're gonna leave
See what just happened?
Oh,
Dude,
no.
I jumped into the ship and it shot me out. Dude, what?
Helldivers 2 reminds me of Star Wars Battlefront 2 and makes me think what kind of game we could have gotten with Battlefront 3. Overall, I've had a lot of fun with Helldivers 2 and definitely recommend the game, especially if you have friends to play with. Number 5, Yakuza 0. Yakuza 0 is a very interesting game. On the surface, it's a beat-em-up crime drama that takes place in Japan, but when you take a closer look, you get this. Seriously, when I tell you I haven't laughed this hard at a game in a long time, I mean it. I am not kidding. The Yakuza series is notorious for having these seemingly serious characters doing the most outlandish and ridiculous things. In Yakuza 0, you play as both Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima, 2 totally different characters with different arcs that eventually cause them to cross paths by the end of the game. Every character in this game is packed full of personality, and that just shows the effort that was put into this amazing fighting series. Also, I forgot to mention that Yakuza 0 is canonically the first game in the series, so this game is technically what started the events of the series in the first place. The combat in this game is fairly straightforward at first, as you're mainly just mashing buttons, but as the game goes on, you'll learn more advanced combos and new fighting styles that really shake things up. The story in this game is a bit slow at first, I won't lie, but when the game starts to pick up, it really picks up. There's so many twists and turns throughout the main plot, especially figuring out how Majima and Kiryu meet. The side quests in the Yakuza series are some of the best in gaming, as there's so much comedy in almost every single one. For example, there's one side quest where you have to rescue this girl from an insane cult, and you have to do some pretty stupid things to get her back. Another where you have to buy an adult magazine for a kid while trying not to get caught and judged by adult women, and another where you have to train a dominatrix. The list goes on, but those are just some normal side quests you'll find in any Yakuza game, and that's just a small portion of the game itself. But for all those reasons, Yakuza 0 gets the number 5 spot on my list. Number 4, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. What can I say about Dragon Ball that hasn't been said already? The fights, the transformations, the characters. I could talk about Dragon Ball forever. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is the 4th game in the Budokai Tenkaichi series, and Budokai Tenkaichi has never looked or played better. This game is literally the definition of a playground for Dragon Ball fans, as you can recreate all sorts of iconic fights in the series, along with playing through the story modes for each character. Each character also has some alternate timelines called What Ifs, which are great, as you're not just replaying the same Dragon Ball story that almost every single game covers. The combat is very fun and relatively simple to pick up, but it does have some depth to it as you master the controls. There's also competitive online fights, but I don't really do competitive for some reason when it comes to Dragon Ball games. Sparking Zero is just plain out fun, and I know I'll enjoy the game for years to come, or until the next Dragon Ball game comes out. But if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, I highly recommend Sparking Zero if you're tired of Xenoverse 2, because that's basically the GTA 5 of Dragon Ball games, let's be honest. Number 3, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. Yes, I know, another Atlas game on the list, but hear me out. As a lot of you on the channel already know, I am currently in the middle of uploading my playthrough of Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance that I finally finished a few weeks ago, but I had a blast revisiting the world of Dot. Honestly, at first, I didn't want to do another playthrough of SMT5 because I was expecting the game to have very minor changes. I was so very wrong. Atlas added a whole new story arc to play through, as there's brand new characters, bosses, demons, and side quests to do. The new story also fleshes out the cast way more than the original, which was desperately needed, and adds some new faces that add to the story as well. Base SMT5 just felt unfinished, and Vengeance adds so many quality of life features to the game, like for example, the Magatsu rails that allow you to navigate the map a lot easier, and a bunch of other changes that just make the experience overall so much smoother. Speaking of maps, Vengeance added a brand new area as well, which was a very welcome addition. If you're looking to play the definitive version of SMT5, make sure you grab Vengeance. Or if you're interested in watching someone else play the game, I'll be sure to put a link of both my playthroughs in the description. Number 2, Final Fantasy 16. I already know that this will be a very controversial placement on this list. I was honestly thinking about putting it at number 1 for a while. Final Fantasy 16 came out last year as a PS5 exclusive, but was re-released this year on PC back in September. The version I played through was the PS5 version, and my goal was to finish it before the PC version was released back in September, which I actually ended up doing, and I had a lot of fun doing it. The last 2 Final Fantasy games have been action RPGs, and this one cranked up the action to the next level. This was thanks to the help of combat director Ryota Suzuki, who also worked on Devil May Cry, which really surprised me. So this made the gameplay extremely fun, but it got a little repetitive after a while since there was a lot of button mashing. The way you fight is with your icon abilities that you unlock throughout the story, so you'll be able to mix and combine your favorite abilities together to create some really cool combos. My favorite parts of the game, however, were the story and the music. The story is basically about these people called bearers who can use magic that are looked down upon by society as freaks. There's also a rarer type of person called a dominant, which can use magic like the bearers, along with transforming and harnessing the power of an icon, which are the Final Fantasy summons in this game, such as Ifrit, Bahamut, Shiva, Titan, all those guys. Clive is the main character of this game, and he has a goal of making the world a truly equal place for bearers, dominants, and normal humans alike, since he was born a dominant. I was a huge fan of Clive, as in my opinion he was really relatable. He wasn't the edgy macho man character, but he wasn't necessarily the perfect textbook knight in shining armor, which was a nice change of pace. You can really feel his anger, his grief, and the burden he has to carry in order to fulfill his dream of making the world truly equal. And Ben Starr, his voice actor, did an amazing job. I really fell in love with the entire cast and honestly wanted more, but all we got were 2 DLCs, which weren't too bad, as both added new equipment and a couple new icon abilities along with some smaller story pieces. As I said earlier, the music in this game was phenomenal, and normally if a game has a really good soundtrack, I'll listen to it for days. This game was no different, as there's so many great tracks present here. Masayoshi Soken is an absolute legend, as I have so much respect for his work. Like, just listen to some of these, they're absolutely beautiful. I will say I can see why this game has mixed reception, as some of the side quests are kind of boring, and I felt like navigating the world felt a little bit slow, even with a chocobo. And as I said earlier, the combat can get repetitive after a while. Honestly, this game got me through a very tough time in my life, so there's a little bit of bias present. I do hope, however, that the next Final Fantasy will go back to the traditional turn-based combat. I truly believe, though, that you should give Final Fantasy 16 a shot, and that's why it gets number 2 on the list. Okay, before we get to number 1, we have a few new categories I'm adding to this year's list. First off, we're doing the honorable mentions. These are games that I played this year that I either didn't finish or didn't quite make my list, but I feel made enough of an impact on me to add it. Here are my honorable mentions. Path of Exile 2, a very fun and addictive action RPG I am currently playing through. Pal World, a really cool take on the monster tamer genre. Dave the Diver, a unique adventure game with a restaurant management simulator thrown in. Dredge, a fishing horror game where you uncover mysteries about the sea and the surrounding towns. And lastly, a game I haven't beaten yet that would have definitely made this list this year, that being the Dragon Quest III remake, which is a classic JRPG making its return with the HD 2D art style. You guys thought I was done. Next up, I added 2 more categories to this year's list. As for my most anticipated game of 2025, I'm giving it to Monster Hunter Wilds. I've been a fan of Monster Hunter for almost 15 years, so I have a lot of bias towards this series, so expect to see Wilds on next year's list as well. And now for my last new category of this year, this is my best game-related TV show, and I'm giving it to Arcane Season 2. I know, League of Legends. I've played League of Legends for about 4-ish years now. So I'm still relatively new, but I've always been interested in the lore for the game since I found out it actually had some. So when I heard they were coming out with a TV show back in 2021, I was excited. And Season 2 took the show to the next level. If you haven't seen Arcane Season 1 or Season 2, please go watch it. And I hope Riot Games comes out with more League of Legends shows. Now, for the moment you've all been waiting for. Number 1, Balatro. I never expected this game to be as good as it is. I first saw Balatro in June of 2023 and was super excited as the gameplay looked very addicting and fun. Balatro is a roguelike deck builder card game where you build poker hands using your chosen deck to get past a certain score threshold called an ante. Each ante consists of 3 rounds: small blind, big blind, and the boss blind, and each of these provide different challenges that really make you think. In order to beat some of the tougher blinds, you'll need to invest in some special cards that you can buy in the shop to make your decks even better. So the fact that there is build crafting in this game really hooked me, as I am a big fan of build crafting and min-maxing when it comes to my games. The game may sound a bit complicated at first, but I promise you it's not too difficult to pick up on. I had a friend who has never played poker pick up the game and understood it after a few runs. Balatro is just such a unique game and a breath of fresh air in this AAA gaming landscape we live in, and I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. There's a reason it won 3 awards at the Game Awards and had even more nominations. It's one of those games that you can pick up and put back down whenever you want and not have to worry about losing progress, which is super nice for people who don't have hours of free time after work or school. Roguelikes in general have a lot of replayability, and Balatro is no different. And for all those reasons, Balatro gets my number 1 spot for 2024. Alrighty, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope 2024 treated you better than it did me. I also wish you all a happy new year and an even better 2025, and I can't wait to see how big the channel gets next year. I hope you all enjoyed watching this video as well, because I'm gonna make this a yearly tradition from now on, because I really enjoyed making these. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe if you're new here, and don't forget to comment. And once again, happy new year, guys. Have a good one. Peace.